apparently Europe and the world is shaking in its collective shoes right now because they believe that, based on what Stephen Miller said, Donald Trump is about to militarily take over Greenland. I woke up to this morning, and I'm listening to this interview with Jake Tapper and Stephen Miller. And Tapper, I got to tell you, he's not getting it. And so I'm going to play you the audio. And Stephen Miller, at one point, actually literally laughs in Jake Tapper's face. But the lead up to this conversation was this notion that Donald Trump is at war with Venezuela. Right? You've probably maybe seen or heard, but there's some people out there that are saying that Donald Trump is at war with Venezuela, which couldn't be further from the truth. But this is the absurdity of folks on the left. So I'm going to get to that. But first, I do want to talk about this whole Greenland thing, because this made a lot of headlines this morning. So this is Jake Tapper and CNN and Stephen Miller. And Tapper literally is accusing the Trump administration of planning to take over Greenland militarily. Listen to this.
It has been the formal position of the U.S. government since the beginning of this administration, frankly, going back into the previous Trump administration, that Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
It wouldn't be military action against Greenland. The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark?
All right, so a few things. And again, this was the top of the Daily Mail and Fox News when I woke up this morning. Stephen Miller, Jake Tapper going toe-to-toe on Greenland. So you're listening to this and how Jake Tapper is framing the question. Will the United States rule out taking military action against Greenland? And how Miller, of course, is pushing back. Now, clearly, this is not the same situation as Venezuela, where clearly we have been wronged by Venezuela for a long time. But what we've actually done is just, arrested Maduro. But Greenland is different. They're just like hanging out there. And suddenly Donald Trump is talking about, and I'm air quoting this, taking over their country. Now, right now, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and they are considered autonomous. They have their own government, but they are still essentially beholden to Denmark for things like foreign policy and monetary policy as well. But to Miller's question about Denmark's right to assert control over Greenland, this goes back literally to the 1700s. Norway and Denmark were one nation. They split in 1814. Greenland ended up going with Denmark, and they've been together ever since, not really happily all the time. There's some tensions. There's some obvious history between the two countries, if you will. But, here's the deal, is that right now, Miller asked the question, why does Denmark have a right to assert control over Greenland? It goes back to the 1700s. Now, I'm Team Trump all the way on most things. On this one, I think that there's a lot of strategic reasons why we should have Greenland and have control of Greenland and make it a territory or whatever. But where Stephen Miller really actually does make sense is when he brings up NATO. Listen to this.
The United States is the power of NATO.
Mm-hmm.
For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. And so that's a conversation that we're going to have as a country. That's a process we're going to have as a community of nations.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland. You can't take it off the table.
Jake, I understand you're trying very hard to, which again, is your job. I respect it. It's great to get exactly the headline, right? That catchy headline.
I'm trying to get an answer to the question.
That says.
Okay, so Joan, are you listening?
I am.
All right, so I'm going to replay this because clearly Stephen Miller is not talking about militarily taking over NATO. I want you to listen to how Jake Tapper, again, because he keeps going back to militarily taking over Greenland.
Yeah.
And listen to how he frames the question.
Power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. And so that's a conversation that we're going to have as a country. That's a process we're going to have as a community of nations.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland. You can't take it off the table.
Jake.
I mean, listen to Jake Tapper. It's like
because Stephen Miller won't say no. He won't say no. That's not going to happen. Well, of course he's going to say that.
The thing is, Tapper is trying to frame it in a way where, and Stephen Miller calls him out. He doesn't finish the thought, so I'll finish the thought. But what Jake Tapper is trying to do is have the headline, Stephen Miller refuses to take a military takeover of Greenland. That's what he's trying to do. Literally, Stephen Miller is saying, we got to talk to NATO, we want to talk to Denmark, we want to talk to Greenland and somehow try to make this happen. And so they're talking apples and oranges. You've got Jake Tapper, who is trying to, make this whole military takeover thing happen. And Stephen Miller's like, that's not what this is about.
I understand you're trying very hard to, which again, is your job. I respect it. It's great to get exactly the headline, right? That catchy headline.
I'm trying to get an answer to the question.
That says Miller refuses to rule out. The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
And that was the soundbite that everybody started freaking out on. Nobody is going to fight the United States over Greenland. And so I don't, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I mean, most people know that, but I don't see where Tapper is trying to, make this into some sort of a military takeover. I mean, we have a base there. It's like an air base. I don't know if it's considered an Air Force base, but Miller's basically talking about coming up with an understanding. Tapper's the one that is going down this road of some sort of a military takeover. And so now that is part of the news cycle this morning. And by the way, Denmark is part of NATO. We're going to talk about NATO and really what Stephen Miller is talking about, because it does make sense that we would, if we wanted to, and if we could have this conversation, why it does make sense for us to control Greenland from a geopolitical perspective. So Denmark, we're talking about, just if you're just joining us, Jake Tapper and Stephen Miller with the Trump administration arguing over whether or not Trump is going to try to militarily take over Greenland. This was very much in the news, and CNN was talking about this earlier as well. So what country is the driving force in NATO? It is the United States, right? So from Stephen Miller's standpoint, if we're going to be the ones that are going to be funding NATO, which essentially we are, and we're the ones that are the main driver, the main military force in NATO, then, yeah, it should be a conversation about the United States taking over Greenland and Greenland being part of the United States. Again, Denmark is part of NATO, actually a founding member. So technically, Greenland is protected by Article 5, and NATO has come out and said, no, you can't, try to militarily take over Greenland. That would be a NATO violation. But we do have an air base there. It is for U.S. radar and missile tracking. Greenland, by the way, right across from Russia. So if missiles start coming, we'll be able to see it right away. And if we own it, I'm assuming that we could put weapons on Greenland as well. We do have Space Force operations there, too. So we've already got a pretty good hand in Greenland. The administration's reasoning militarily is that if we're supposed to be the driving force in NATO, especially monetarily, we give far more than any other country, then we should have a right to have at least the conversation. Now, the people of Greenland, and there's some polling, but, I don't trust polling, but by and large, the people in Greenland, if you listen to the polling, for what it's worth, they have no interest in joining the United States. Like 85% of the people in Greenland said, no. We don't especially like Denmark, but we really don't want to become part of the United States. Also, and we've talked about this many times, friends, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but there's also minerals. There's lots and lots of minerals, rare earth minerals that are crucial for defense, AI, and missile guidance systems as well. You've got uranium, nickel, copper, zinc, and a lot more. So if you want to build, military equipment, if you want to build things associated with AI, they've got a lot of minerals right there in Greenland. And so that's also part of the conversation. Also, don't forget, and Donald Trump has talked about this, also don't forget that in the waters around Greenland, you've got China and Russian ships as well all over the place. And so I actually understand the reasoning behind Stephen Miller saying, you know what, if we're going to be the superpower within NATO, and if we're going to be the ones that are funding NATO, then absolutely, it makes sense to at least have the conversation to allow us to utilize Greenland as, part of a military standpoint, a geopolitical standpoint, and, a strategic standpoint. I when he puts it and he frames it in that sense, it does make sense. Now, Jake Tapper, again, not to belabor the point, but Jake Tapper is trying to make it about some sort of a military takeover because that's what the media is trying to make this whole arrest of Maduro in, is some sort of a military takeover of Venezuela, and that's not what it is. Donald Trump even came out and said, we're not at war. Mike Johnson came out and said yesterday, I've got the audio coming up, we're not at war with Venezuela. Quit trying to frame the arrest of Maduro in that sense. It is exactly the opposite. We are trying to save Venezuela. I want to call an audible, Joan. Omaha,
oh, really?
Omaha.
When you do this, usually it's for something big.
Not really. What I want to do is earlier we posed the question on YouTube. Watch us on YouTube. Take the Daily Dan poll. Earlier, the question was rather stupid. Sam's idea. Would you rather be a senator or a governor? And what did people say?
Senator edged out governor 51% to 49%.
I think senators make more money through corruption than governors.
Yeah, the kickbacks.
Yeah, the kickbacks. So I think that's why Joan said that she would rather be a senator.
I think you have just besmirched me.
I didn't say anything. Anyway, so...
You just have to
good.
follow the Pelosi format.
That's exactly right. Jane, I'm just kidding. All right, so now I want to do a new one. So I was talking about Greenland earlier and the battle between Jake Tapper and Stephen Miller. And should we take over Greenland? And we went through the whole thing about the framing from Jake Tapper and, saying that we were militarily going to take over Greenland, which is not what we're going to do. But I want to know, does the WTN audience believe that we should take over Greenland?
Specifically, do you mean, should Greenland become a U.S. territory?
Sure. Yeah. Frame it like that. That's fine. And because I think that, and some people agreed with me on the super text line. Others didn't. But I think that framing it as, look, if we're going to be the driving force militarily and financially in NATO, then if we want to have Greenland as part of our country, part of our territory, then, we should have that conversation. And I personally, the way that Miller put it, framing it within NATO, I think it makes all the sense in the world. So go ahead and put that up.
It's up. And for reference, I didn't know till I looked it up. Greenland is 25% larger than the state of Alaska. And it's also oil rich. And as you mentioned earlier, all of those mineral resources as well, they're just totally untapped on an island of 56,000 people.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So, there's a lot of reasons why, we could use Greenland. And now Donald Trump has come out and he has said, and others have said, well, we don't need the minerals. We have plenty of... No. We need the minerals. And just like there's people that are saying, and I get why people are saying it. We don't need the oil in Venezuela. But if we can starve China of Venezuela's oil, that is where the geopolitical stuff comes in. So speaking of which, I love this. Let's let's talk about what happened at the UN yesterday, because I do find this interesting. The arrest of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Now, here's the headline. Trump administration's capture of Maduro raises unease about the international legal framework. I don't get this. I mean, I do get it. They're trying to demonize Donald Trump. The same people that were screaming, no kings, are now really upset that Donald Trump has arrested Nicolas Maduro, who was clearly acting and behaving as the strongman that he was in Venezuela, basically destroying the country. So they were indicted. We arrested them, pure and simple. But listen to this. This is from the Associated Press. This is how they're framing this. From the smoldering wreckage of two catastrophic world wars in the last century, nations came together to build an edifice of international rules and international laws. The goal was to prevent such sprawling conflicts in the future. Now, they write, that world order centered at the United Nations headquarters in New York, near the courtroom where Nicolas Maduro was arraigned on Monday after his removal from power in Venezuela, appears in danger of crumbling as the doctrine of might makes right muscles its way onto the global stage. So they're trying to make this seem like somehow Donald Trump is removing a legit leader of the country of Venezuela, when clearly the president and his administration and Republicans have laid out the exact reason why we went in with that incredible military operation and arrested Nicolas Maduro and his wife. It's like all of the drug trafficking and the brutality against his own people never even happened. You know, according to the Democrats and some in the media, Nicolas Maduro was just a lovable, affable leader to the happy and content people of Venezuela. No, that's not how it went.
He's just a Venezuelan man.
It's what he is, Venezuelan man. So the UN ambassador was talking to the UN, addressing the UN yesterday, and he had to set those people straight. Listen to this.
This past weekend, colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. Colleagues, Nicolas Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela. Mm-hmm. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation.
I mean, it really is just that simple. George Conway is launching a congressional bid. Did you see that? Is that new?
No, he had launched that
I know
earlier.
He talked about that. So he's still not married to Kellyanne Conway,
They're
right?
divorced.
I can't imagine why. Anyway, moving along. So listen, we took great pains, getting back to Venezuela, sorry about that. We took great pains to ensure there were no civilian casualties in Venezuela during this law enforcement operation. We are going to help rebuild Venezuela. That is why clearly we're not at war with Venezuela. You know, the last time I checked, when you went to war with a nation, you didn't necessarily care all that much about the civilian casualties. But what we are doing is we are trying to make Venezuela a better country. And I got to tell you that if you're Donald Trump, if you're, a conservative, which I am, you got to actually resent the way that the media is framing this, because this is something that Donald Trump has been saying for a long time. He offered, y'all know this, he offered Maduro to just, dude, it's time for you to just go. You just need to go, and you need to, go live someplace else, go make a deal with Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, whatever. But we're going to get you if you don't leave on your own. So we can either do this the easy way or the hard way. And Maduro, he chose to do this the hard way. And now he's in handcuffs. And now he'll more than likely, hopefully anyway, spend the rest of his time, the rest of his life in prison. And we're going to help Venezuela tap into those amazing natural resources. Somebody chimed in on the super text line, getting a lot this morning, so I forget who it was from. But they said, pay attention to the media and how they are framing this, which I have been, because they really are trying to sell that Donald Trump is just some sort of a bombastic warmonger. And that was what I said about the Jake Tapper interview with Stephen Miller, where Tapper is just trying to frame the story about Greenland as Donald Trump is going to militarily take over Greenland, which is not what the administration has been saying. Now, as far as Venezuela goes, they're also trying to say that we are at war with Venezuela, which it couldn't be any further from the truth. We're going to have our own oil companies go in, make investments in their infrastructure, and then share in the benefits of their oil reserves, among other things. And in the process, and this is the whole point, in the process, you're putting China on notice that we now control the oil that they so desperately need from Venezuela. You don't think China would do that to us if they could? Absolutely they would. That's a big part of this conversation. I know it's about, the drugs. And no. I mean, yes, it is, but no. It's also about the oil. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. China has been, and we talked about this yesterday, China has been getting their oil from Venezuela and Iran. Iran, of course, now destabilized because of the protests there against the government. So we now control the oil fields of Venezuela. So there is a lot going on here that is geopolitical. That's the real world. And Donald Trump is living in the real world. Here's more from Michael Waltz, who is our ambassador to the United Nations, as he was addressing the UN.
In furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades, the United States arrested a narco trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. A similar action was taken in 1989 against Manuel Noriega. He was arrested, indicted, convicted in a court of law, served in prison in the United States and in Panama, and the Panamanian people, the American people, are safer for it. And undeniably, the region was more stable. This law enforcement action was directed consistent with the President of the United States' responsibility as Commander-in-Chief to protect Americans at home and abroad.
I mean, he's right. But this is from the Associated Press. Listen to this. Analysts and some world leaders from China to Mexico have condemned the Venezuelan mission. Really? You went to China and got their opinion on what, Donald Trump did? Of course, China is going to condemn the Venezuelan mission. Not surprised about Mexico either. They say some voiced fears that Maduro's ouster could pave the way for more military interventions and a further erosion of what they're calling the global legal order. Listen, Trump is doing what he needs to do. And Michael Waltz, the UN ambassador from the United States, he is spot on. They keep talking about this global legal order, which means what? The bad guys can get away with doing bad stuff to America? That's the thing. It's like you can take your global legal order and stick it. I would say that to the United Nations. I'd say that to the Associated Press. This guy killed Americans. The polite society of the United Nations apparently doesn't like that when America decides to take decisive action. But I like what Donald Trump did. I do. And again, this is a move against China and Venezuela, obviously. Where was the United Nations when China was stealing our intellectual property? That would be my question. Where was the United Nations when they were spying on America? Where was the United Nations when China was sending fentanyl into our country via Mexico, smuggling it across our border to kill 100,000 Americans every single year? Where the heck was the United Nations? They were nowhere to be found. So I would love it if Donald Trump just said what I just said. United Nations, you have a problem with it? China, you've got a problem with it? Mexico, you have a problem with it? Stick it.
Nicolas Maduro and his co-defendant, Celia Flores, have been transferred here to the United States to stand trial for their crimes. Maduro was indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York and faces very serious criminal charges for his involvement in a wide-ranging conspiracy to conduct narcoterrorism, to traffic cocaine and other drugs, and conducting international weapons trafficking. The overwhelming evidence of his crimes will be presented openly in U.S. court proceedings. Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president.
All right, so there you go. I mean, Michael Waltz, our U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, making a lot of sense. The Associated Press and a lot of people in the media trying to say that Donald Trump is trying to take over the world militarily. Clearly, that is not the case. And so there is obviously, CNN. Today is the anniversary of January 6th.
Oh, weird. Channel 4 just had that too.
Did they really?
Yeah.
You know what's so funny? I didn't even think about that. They're still trying to sell January 6th, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, apparently there's an Ashley Babbitt Remembrance March.
Oh, okay. Well, that should happen.
Yeah.
That should absolutely happen. Where is that in Washington, D.C.?
I think so. I think it's in D.C.
Maybe in San Diego. She was from, I think, wasn't she from San Diego? I think Ashley Babbitt was from San Diego. So anyway, yeah, if you're going to remember January 6th, then you got to remember Ashley Babbitt. And you got to remember in my opinion, a lot of the people that were railroaded by the federal government and spent all that time in those horrific prisons. And I think Donald Trump absolutely did the right thing by pardoning all those people.